From the Greens. It's my pleasure to have the opening statement or comment in this webinar today, and obviously electromobility and issues with batteries are something that we all MEPs are very keenly looking at, because we will need a lot more batteries, better lasting batteries, but also electromobility that is based on more sustainable solution. That we will need this to be scaled up very fast in the coming years. So it's not just a question anymore about 10 years from now, 15 years, 20 years from now. It's during this 5-year period that we MEPs and this commission is sitting, that we will have the big electrification transformation in our mobility. So talking about the batteries, obviously this is the key challenge, one of the key challenges in addressing climate change, because 76% of EU CO2 emissions come from different forms of energy. And renewable electrification is key in cutting our emissions, and batteries make this electrification possible. Obviously, there is going to be a big shift also in how our electricity system will work and how we produce energy, and this will need more storage capabilities, both in domestic solutions and in industrial scale, and this is possible by developing batteries. Batteries are also a significant element in decarbonizing the whole energy system as a system-wide solution, because we will need more grids, smarter use, demand-side management, and more storage, which the focus on renewables and sustainable carbon-free energy solutions. Batteries can play a role in this future dispersed energy system, whether the battery is in a house, a storage system, or in a vehicle. So there are different kind of batteries needed. And in transport, which is a quarter of EU emissions, we will need sustainable batteries to cut emissions and can keep us moving. We cannot produce sustainably sufficient volumes of biofuels or synthetic fuels. I know that I'm coming from Finland personally, that there is a keen interest in using biofuels in the Nordics, for example. But if you look at the sustainability of that, what can be sustainable sales of producing biofuels, we don't get those amounts sustainably that are needed to keep our mobility moving in Europe. So electrification is going to be a key component in that, especially in personal vehicles. And that means, again, more focus on making batteries better in the short term, because that's one of the loopholes we have. Passenger cars receive now the most attention, as mentioned, but we should not forget about the opportunities in public transport, e-bikes, heavy-duty transport, and also maybe in short sea shipping, in small-scale shipping, because there will be plenty of different solutions needed also in shipping, and electromobility can be a solution there as well. So from the EU lawmakers' side, it's welcome that the EU has spoken to tackling transport emissions, obviously, in the last few years. The Commission's sustainable and smart mobility strategy was much needed update to the transport white paper, which was already from 2013, so that was outdated as it was. And we will need economy-wide change to zero emissions, and this includes transport system as a whole, so it's important that this is looked at. And the strategy itself calls for a shift to the existing paradigm of incremental change to fundamental transformation. And this fundamental transformation in our mobility system is definitely needed. Batteries are also tackled in many policy fronts, not just in investment. It's in Horizon Europe, it's in industrial strategy, it's the circular economy action plan, and also the topic of today, significantly updated battery regulation. We welcome the updated battery regulation, which is key to ensuring batteries are always sustainable. This is crucial, as we will need batteries to decarbonize our energy system, and we don't want excuses to continue the business as usual. So sustainability of batteries, the longevity of battery use, these questions are vital in tackling the scale of our electrification and increase of use of batteries. There are some issues with sustainability of batteries, but I'm confident they can be managed with good regulation that sets tight requirements and harmonized single markets and promotes market development of solutions, more sustainable solutions that are already there but not yet market viable. So it is good that the proposed regulation introduces obligations to report the life cycle emissions, pushes for longer lasting batteries, and tackles the raw material production side, including also human rights in production as well as social and ecological standards. So with these words and having spoken even when it's this early in the morning, fast enough, it seems that we have catch up also in the timetable, and I'm looking forward to the panels. So thanks a lot for having the opportunity to open this event.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction here, and look forward to meet you in the near future. So this brings us to our panel. I will share the panel here. So first of all, we have a panel discussion which on production and competitiveness on battery production. We have here today Jos Dinks from Tesla, Alex Keynes from Transport Environment, Patrick de Metz of Saft, and Jutta Gutland of the European Parliament. Welcome speakers. I'll give first the word to Jos Dinks, who will start with an introductory slide. Jos, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I will take over the screen from you.
Yeah.
And I will make myself visible. Can you see the screen?
I see the screen. If you can switch to presentation mode,
yes.
The full screen.
Yes. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to represent Tesla on this occasion. Pleased that you are all joining. I want to give you a.
Sorry, can you put it in presentation mode?
I think it is. Isn't it?
I see the full PowerPoint background.
Is this better?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I want to take you quickly through our plans for Europe, batteries in Europe, and some quick views on the proposed regulation of last December. Let me see. Yeah. Well, you're probably aware that our mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. We take particularly the acceleration bit of that very, very seriously. The speed of transformation and the speed of the transition is the key challenge if we want to effectively tackle climate change. I won't go into this all that much, but it paints a timeline of the last 17 years of our entire existence. And it's a history of, as a startup, trying to gain a foothold in a market that allows to earn a return on initial investment, which was the sports car market. Then we went into the premium market with Model S and Model X. And now we are making steady steps towards more mass market adoption with Model 3 and Model Y. And we want to keep pushing down the price of our products so electric mobility becomes affordable to everyone. And for that, we need sustainable scaling and localization of production. This is a history of deliveries. As you see, it's a history of fast growth. We're very proud that we offer non-compromise electric vehicles that have a good range, that don't give rise to range anxiety. Also, to address range anxiety, we have put down a fully comprehensive charging network in Europe. We are approaching 600 stations now on the entire continent, with plans for many, many more. with with close to 6,000 individual charging stalls with up to 250 kilowatts of power. So you can travel the entire continent in our vehicles without any stress. On the topic of batteries, we think the key issue in batteries is not so much that they are not good enough. We think our batteries are pretty good as they are. You see the retention rates based on user reports, capacity retention rates over time. Note that the x-axis is in miles. So after 300,000 kilometers, our vehicles still typically retain 90% of their original range. So we are not so concerned about the durability or the performance of the batteries. Our longest range vehicle currently has 650 kilometers range on the WLTP cycle. So the actual performance of the batteries are not, we think, the key issue that needs to be addressed. The key issue, I'll come to that later, but we do think that batteries are actually performant and good enough to also deploy in heavy-duty applications. We're working on a long-range heavy truck. We will start production later this year in the US, and we're also planning to bring the product to Europe, and we'll keep you posted on the timeline for that. So coming to the problem, we are still in the very early stages of market transformation. Of course, electric vehicles have received a lot of press in the last couple of years, but the reality is still that 95% of cars sold still have a combustion engine. So we're in the very, very early stages. And one of the things that we are doing to overcome the problem of scale and the problem of cost is localizing production. A bit more than a year ago, we decided on building a so-called gigafactory close to Berlin, the outskirts of Berlin. On the left, you see the render. On the right, you see where we actually are with construction, a nice snowy impression. It will build our new vehicle, the Model Y, in huge numbers, as you see. And recently, we also decided to supplement this location with a very big cell production facility with a capacity of 100 megawatt hours per year, and possibly more into the future. I don't know whether you can see my mouse, but the plant location for the cell facility is over here, so in the right top corner of the picture. So what exactly is our problem diagnosis with cells? I'd like to really connect also with what the previous speaker said. It's a sustainable scaling challenge. Our analysis is that we need 20 terawatt hours of cell production in 2030 globally if we want to tackle the climate change challenge effectively. That is around 7 times more than is currently being planned. So, this is extremely important to let that sink in, 7 times more. So our diagnosis is that, you see on the left of the slide, the ultimate size of our current gigafactory in Nevada, which is an enormous facility. In order to reach the 20 terawatt hours, you need 135 of those enormous facilities worldwide by 2030. We don't think this is feasible, and we need a huge innovation to actually make it feasible. The investment required is way too high, $2 trillion, and we need 3 million people or so to man those factories, and getting those skills is extremely challenging. So we devised a plan for sustainable scaling of battery production. It consists of 5 pillars. I won't go into each of them, it's way too much, but we think our plan is good enough to around halve the cost of batteries. So electric vehicles become much more affordable in all segments of the car market. And we also want to emphasize that the plan that we are currently executing on, including in Berlin will actually be the first facility that will have the new technology, cell production in the world. So we're very excited about that. Just to mention one element of what we're doing is that we are deploying a so-called dry electrode technology, which completely eliminates the need for solvents, which are pretty nasty chemicals, and the need for drying ovens, which are one of the largest constituent elements of the carbon footprint of a battery. The fact that you need to dry the electrodes in enormous ovens. And we hugely simplify that process through which you can reduce the cost, reduce the carbon footprint, reduce the energy, reduce the chemicals, and make the factories a lot smaller as well in the process. So that's why we we are actually changing our nomenclature from giga to tera. We need to start thinking in terawatt hours, that we can, in facilities where we currently think in gigawatt hour scale, we can produce terawatt hours of batteries. Otherwise, we will be simply too late. We often ask about recycling. We are big fans of recycling. We are totally happy with an obligation that we take back all the batteries that we make at the end of their life. The reason is, of course, that it is the most sustainable way to go about this, but there's also a really simple economic argument. The urban mine, in the long run, when we have developed the appropriate technologies, is bound to be a lot cheaper and more attractive than a virgin mine from an environmental and an economic standpoint. So we're very bullish on recycling, and we're working very hard on technologies to extract as much as possible of the virgin materials as we can. Some final remarks on the regulatory proposals. Needless to say, we're still in the process of studying the huge pile of documents. It's a highly consequential piece of legislation. And I want to start off with the elements that we like. We also have a range of significant concerns. What we like is that it is a regulation and not a directive, which means equal application, no room for different national interpretations on categories, on definitions, on waste statuses, all of that, which is very helpful. And also the internal market legal base is a recognition that that the batteries in Europe are evolving into a proper internal market issue. We also like that a lot. We like a specific category for electric vehicle batteries, legal clarity. We like the extended producer responsibility, recycling obligation. We also like the very necessary clarification of responsibilities for second use of the batteries. It's currently a legal void, and it's good that the proposal addresses this legal void. Who is responsible in case a battery gets taken out of a vehicle and used for second life. And we also welcome the proposed recycling recovery of material targets. We think this helps drive best practice in recycling. We also have a very significant list of concerns. It's sometimes hard to decide where to start exactly, but this is a market that is in full evolution and in full development, and there is an enormous amount of regulation now unleashed on that emerging market, which will really, also particularly harm startup battery manufacturers because they are less equipped to deal, with all of the emerging rules. But from a content standpoint, there are proposed rules for recycled content of batteries. We don't see why that is necessary. The obligation to take back the batteries at the end of the life is already there. So why additional requirements to use more recycled material are necessary, I don't know. The additional materials will probably come from outside of Europe if we can't get them from the batteries available in Europe. So that's a concern. The Commission also seems intent on developing rules for the recyclability of batteries. I would like to make it very clear that we as car makers are in the end responsible for having the batteries recycled. So we have every interest ourselves to make our batteries recyclable. If we don't do it, we end up with a big problem ourselves. So, and if it's costly, we pay for these costs ourselves. We are responsible for it. So additional rules, interfere in that optimization process and run the risk of leading to suboptimally designed packs that compromise on performance or durability or other things. We have some concerns about the carbon footprint declaration, particularly the verification requirements that it's defined per batch, which is, we are not really sure what that means, but it can go down to very small volumes. The virtually unrestricted access that is granted to independent operators. We would like to see a more tight description of who actually has the right to get access to battery information. The potential powers to member states to ban batteries that are compliant with the law. And last but not least, a long list of delegated powers to the Commission to adopt rules into the future. And, just as a closing remark, it strikes me that a lot of these requirements also in the supply chain are to be adopted for batteries, and the same is not true for oil, for instance. So, we also strongly feel that there is a fairness issue involved in these regulations. Thank you. I hope I didn't take too much of your time.
Thank you, Jos. Thank you for the introduction on this topic. So I would like to invite hereby the other speakers to kick off the panel discussion. I'm going to try to stop sharing the screen, Jos. Welcome to our speakers. First of all, Alex Kiens, Patrick de Metz, and Jutta Gutland. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
good.
Γιώργο μου, σε παρακαλώ πολύ, καλημέρα. Προχώρα το αυτό με τις μπαταρίες.
Can we hear some other persons as well? Let me see where is. So here bring us to the previewed panel discussion. Jos gave a really nice introduction, and I would like to hear from the speakers what are their thoughts about this. First focus I want to lead to job deployment. We hear a lot of uptake of the industry. Key of the e-mobility industry is indeed the battery package. What do you think about the impact of bringing the battery manufacturing to Europe and the impact on the employment in this case? We have heard before always a lot of criticism that building electric vehicles needs less job labor. So if we see these battery production plants, we hear from the other side that it could be manageable to bring more jobs on board. Any reflection on this?
If it's okay, I'm happy
But of course.
Okay, yes, sir, please.
No, I can wait. I can listen to you first, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to provide a quick comment on that. And firstly, thank you for welcoming us here, and hopefully we can actually have one of these events in the European Parliament in the near future in person. So yeah, it's a really interesting question around the jobs impact. There was a recent study, I think, by the Boston Consulting Group, which tried to, let's say, bust some of the myths around the jobs impact of the electromobility transition, which actually concluded that there was hardly any difference in the amount of personnel needed for the construction of a battery electric vehicle compared to a conventional ICE vehicle. And actually a recent internal Volkswagen study came out with very similar conclusions. Key though to this, and this is obviously what we're here to talk about today, is that batteries and cell production is actually done in Europe. So this is really the key variable here. So if batteries and cells, which according to the BCG study, the Boston Consulting Group study, account for 8% of the working hours in an electric vehicle, if these are just imported from outside of Europe, then the jobs won't come to Europe. It's as simple as that. So I think here it is really good that we're seeing so many gigafactories setting up now in Europe, and you know, this is clearly the time to now set ambitious standards for sustainability requirements, as well as obviously the Commission's new proposal does, and it's a good starting point. But I think, you know, key to this is actually what's driving this whole market is actually the car CO2 standards. This is the real kind of industrial policy that's behind all this. So, you know, the more that we're seeing EV production and EV investment in Europe, the more we're seeing the localized supply chain coming in terms of battery production as well. You know, and so yeah, I mean, I think this is a really good proposal from the Commission in terms of regulating the new battery industry that's coming. But I think if Europe wants to, let's say, plug the gap of the inevitable, there will be some, of course, job losses in the conventional car industry sector. Overall, though, it's clear the jobs impact of the electromobility transition will be positive. We've seen this in loads of studies. There will be more jobs overall, economy-wide. But, you know, the battery industry, the battery cell production industry will be a really good opportunity for workers that are impacted in the conventional car industry, let's say. Furthermore, as well, the more that you bring battery production to Europe, then you know you actually get the whole value chain coming. So as soon as you start seeing much more battery electric vehicle batteries coming onto the end of life, you'll of course need increased recycling capacity, and of course, you know, there'll be thousands more jobs there created in the battery recycling industry as well. Yeah, I'm happy to pass to Jutta.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe also ask on Patrick de Metz. You will be presenting Saft here. How do you see the forecast of battery production and the link to employment?
Well, thank you very much for giving me the microphone. Can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes, we hear and see you.
Hello everyone. Thank you. Well, yes, indeed. I mean, it is quite key that these jobs do materialize in Europe and are not only imported hours, as Alex was saying a few minutes ago. And as you may be aware, Saft has recently partnered with key European automobile manufacturers, so that's Opel and PSA, to launch a European-based cell and batteries manufacturing capacity within the heart of Europe, with 2 gigafactories being slated to be built within the EU, one in the north of France, operational at the start of 2024, followed by a second one in Germany, approximately 2 years thereafter. So we're pushing really hard to materialize cell production within Europe for electric vehicles and other applications. Now, what do we think is necessary to ensure that production gets localized in Europe, that those jobs do materialize on our continent within the EU 27, and not only materialize through imported hours through the products that would come from other continents? I see really three key factors here, and I'd like to go through all 3 of them. The first one is clearly that there has to be large market volume. That means, first of all, why is this? I mean, you can be only successful if you produce in large quantities. This is a numbers industry. You can only be successful if you produce large quantities. So in order to manufacture in large quantities, you need a sizable market, high growth market. We're starting from almost zero. So high growth, sizable markets, contracts with customers, and large production capacity. You cannot start with small production capacities and little contracts here and there with a market that doesn't grow fast. That would be a recipe for failure. So first of all, volumes through market, contracts, and production capacity. Second factor, which is really important too, is public support for advanced technology so that we are ahead, we can stay and be even more ahead of the pack when it comes to battery performance. And some of the elements that were identified by my colleague Jos are really key. It's to be able to bring more and more performance into the battery so that we can stay ahead of the competition. And their public support is key. And it is actually coming from the European institutions and the national institutions. And the third factor, I believe, to be able to be successful to manufacture cells and batteries in Europe for electrical vehicles and applications is a legal framework that allows those actors who follow the expectations of the European society to be able to differentiate their products. And what do I mean when I say actors who follow the expectations of European society? I mean actors who work with suppliers and who work themselves internally in a way which follows the principle of the social market economy and in a way that respects environmental protection expectations from our citizens. We need to have a framework that allows the society and our customers and all the players around us to allow us to differentiate ourselves on those critical factors. And I think in this respect, what we're seeing in the batteries regulation, I'm talking high level here, I'm not talking specific details, actually is a good start to help European actors to leverage on their respect for those principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. And then I indeed want to go to Jytte. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Not sure about it. Yeah, I want to hear a word from your side. We know that the European Commission with the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy has forecasted by 2030 a lot of zero-emission vehicles on the road. So this means more capacity, more battery production, which automatically link. I hear you're speaking about terawatt hours now and not gigawatt anymore. So this looks very promising. What's your point of view on this?
Yeah, first of all, I really share the enthusiasm from many in the panel and also from what you mentioned now in your question. I really believe this will boost Europe. It will improve job situation. But above all, I think it's really important if we are going to be the climate neutral continent that we said that we are going to be at the latest at 2050. And we need the different measures to get there. And I really believe the electrification and e-mobility will play the key part, not at least for transport, but also for many other businesses in Europe. And regarding the jobs, we already got good answers here from Alex and Patrick. And also, I mean, of course, we always need to be moderate with expectations. We should not build vision on dreams, but I seriously believe that batteries will play a key role for the jobs because it also boosts innovation and creation, innovation and different kind of technology development in different sectors, and that will really help creating new jobs in Europe. So it's not only about the factories per se, but it's also about the creation that this transition of the society will mean for Europe. But that being said, in my committee, we focus on the health issue and the climate. And here, I really believe that the battery will play one of the key role to make it possible to reach the climate neutral Europe in 2050 at the latest. And it will already, as we heard in the panel, the upcoming years play a really important role. And to do so, to not get it as a boomerang and then get it back in our heads again, we need to make sure that the regulation is also taking care of the sustainable aspect in every sense. Because it's easy now to say, okay, let's do this, but then if we end up in a situation where the batteries are not sustainable when it comes to social situation where they are created, or nor for the environment, then we will have a big problem in a few years actually, and we will have an enormous debate on that, and that will hinder the important transition that we need to do. So I think that what I was really happy about from the Commission was the introduction of mandatory labeling of batteries, and especially that this will also include information on hazardous substances, for example. I think that will be very important to make sure that we don't get the boomerang effect later on, that the batteries are doing big harm on biodiversity or in our environment. And I also believe it's important that we take a very serious step and do more to make sure that we recycle batteries better. And therefore, here I was not as happy with the Commission because I think they could rise the ambition higher than what they announced when it comes to the recycling, especially lithium, where they limit the recovery of lithium to mere 70%, which is actually significantly lower lower than best practice. And I think we need to do more there to make sure that, as I mentioned before, we don't get a boomerang effect later on when we are doing this transition. Thank you.
Thank you. And brings me to the next question. I hear indeed promising words from all speakers here. Good forecasts and very good ambitions. So in the past we have seen, or recently we have seen that main production of batteries are happening now outside of Europe, mainly in China, and we have to recognize this. The new battery directive brings this solution to this, bring this more industry perspective to Europe, or how can we see this? Anyone wants to kick off on that? Alex?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off. Firstly, if you don't mind, I'd like to just follow up very briefly on some comments that were made by Jutta and Patrick. I mean, could completely agree with what was said. I think what Jutta was saying about the boomerang effect, I think that's really important, obviously, and now is definitely the right time to be setting the most ambitious standards as we have all this investment coming in. I think just a crucial point to keep in mind as the political discussion starts on the new battery law is that batteries already are so much better than what they're replacing. Obviously, unlike conventional combustion engines, batteries don't burn the material that they have inside them, the lithium, the cobalt, the nickel, and this can be obviously fully recovered and used again. And of course, this is where I fully agree with Jutta, the targets for recycling should be as ambitious as possible. And, they should be not setting where we're at today, they should be setting future-proof standards that will drive innovation. Unlike batteries, of course, oil is burnt. So, I mean, clearly there's already, batteries clearly are already much better than what they're replacing. I think in terms of your question about, is this law maybe going to help shift competitiveness back to the EU? I think in our view, the new battery law is an opportunity for Europe to lead in the green battery production. So batteries with the same performance, hopefully, I'm sure Patrick can answer this question better than I can, but batteries with the same performance, same price, but also greener than the competitors. And this is this is why we're happy with what the Commission has started with. You know, it's a proposal trying to create competition based on sustainability, which is great. And you know, given the importance, you know, if the targets for carbon footprint, recycling, and due diligence are ambitious and bold, then this law will have a global effect, of course, and this is obviously what we want. But I think you know, based on obviously something that Patrick said about how, you know, Europe needs to set itself apart from competitors, and I think here is crucial that Europe should not be afraid to set the highest standards for ethical sourcing, carbon footprint, life cycle emissions, and recycling. You know, social and sustainability standards are already in the DNA of European companies, and so in this respect, it's therefore in our interests, or you know, in European players' interests, to set really ambitious targets here to be able to set ourselves apart. I'm sure Patrick can probably answer this as well, this question.
Yeah, good reflection from your side, but I indeed want to hear it also from the production side. But
yeah, so as indicated earlier, I generally agree with your statement. Indeed, the Batteries Directive does lay the foundations to allow the competition to use sustainability as a differentiating factor. We really welcome those blocks, those building blocks in the proposed regulation, and I think they are there. We need to really sift through the wording, which is rather lengthy and complex, to ensure that they're properly tailored, but you know, at the high level, certainly they seem to be there. I would, however, maybe voice a word of caution here. We need to make sure that every entity placing batteries on the market will indeed be held to similar standards. And there is clearly a challenge here to ensure enforceability of the provisions that are spelled out in this draft regulation on every actor placing batteries on the European market. It is, I mean, I think we all understand that it's a lot easier to police how things are done within the 27 EU member states than it is to police how things are done elsewhere. So we need to make sure that the enforcement mechanisms do allow for an equal enforcement across all the different players, whether they are local players or they import products from overseas. I think we'll be looking at the text with this aspect in mind, because I think it's quite critical here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jutta, what is from your side?
I think it's important in this discussion always to remember that the European Green Deal is a growth strategy. That's the idea of the European Green Deal. We often speak about it as if it's about only the transition to climate neutral society, but it's actually a growth strategy in its foundation. And I think regarding the batteries as a very key role in the European Green Deal, it will definitely help Europe to both, as I mentioned before, by innovation, green technique development, but it will be an important part of growth for Europe in the upcoming years. And that being said, we need to, the big part will be done by industry, so it's not the politicians who will have the ideas on how to help Europe to get on track and take the leadership, but we can make sure that the direction is sound when it comes to, as I mentioned before, the sustainable parts, so we don't get problems later on, as mentioned. But and we can also make sure that we have all the values are always that we don't go back to protectionism. We don't have that in our mind, because that will not help the world, and it will certainly not help Europe or EU to develop. But in the same time that we do strategic moves for our own industry. So we see that by having a very attractive and good environment for both industry, but also regarding what's needed for the future, that will also help us to benefit from this transition when it comes to growth and jobs. But I leave many of these things to the committee, IMCO, who is responsible for the internal market. But I will definitely focus myself on making it sustainable, both for social sustainability, but above all for environment and climate. And by doing so, I think we make sure that we actually help Europe to develop a very growth-friendly and job-friendly future. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few posts in the Q&A. Some of them are rather statements. So I have one question, and we have to limit on time to respect our time frames here. This is actually about UK-EU trade deal. EU EV should not contain EU battery, and EU battery should not contain EU battery materials. Question is actually, isn't a missed opportunity to stimulate EU domestic battery value chain? It's specifically on the UK-EU trade deal. Has anyone a point of view on this? Patrick, you raise your hand.
Yeah,
Short.
Yes, this EU-UK trade deal that was published days ago is rather complex in its wording and technicity. I think it requires very careful reading of all the fine prints to truly understand the impacts of that deal on the trade of electric vehicles and batteries for electric vehicles between the kingdom and the continent. I think we need to really read the fine prints very carefully. I wouldn't jump to conclusions stating that the deal is inadequate. I need to raise a word of caution here. We need to read this very thoroughly to make sure we understand it properly.
Thank you. Gitte, do you have any comments on this?
No, I would also say from my point of view, it would be too early, even though we are soon voting in the parliament. I would say no, I pass on this one.
Okay, no problem. I think maybe we can conclude on this panel discussion from here with the focus on battery production. We see that the strategy is there, the ambitions are there from the industry, from the policymakers. It's a difficult exercise that we make. We have to see the beneficiaries, and we also have to get people in the EVs. We have the buyers at the end as well. They need to buy these products as well and make the future possible for this industry. So this brings me to the second panel discussion about recycling and second life. It has already been touched by the previous panel. We're going to have a complementary view on the battery directive in this case. This second panel will be kicked off by Jean-Denis Kurt, Recycling and Circular Economy Unit Manager from Renault Nissan. Welcome. You want to start this panel discussion with some introductory slides?
Yes. Thank you very much. Please allow me to share a couple of slides to illustrate my speech. Can you see the screen, and can you hear me properly?
Yeah. Can see the screen. I hear you clearly. If you could go to presentation mode. Voila, here we are.
Okay. So yes, I'll try to be brief, but I'd like to explain how we are at Renault. We are striving to maximize and optimize the whole lifespan and the whole life cycle of our batteries. and particularly to give them a second life anytime when it's possible. So the point is, as Jos mentioned earlier, EV batteries, or at least well, good EV batteries, but at least that's the case for our batteries as well. They have a very long, actually a very good durability, and they can last as long as the car, but at the end of the car life, they still have a very significant storage capacity. And we believe that it would be a shame to destroy them, actually to recycle them, which means to recover the materials, but destroy the full objects and lose this storage capacity. So we believe there is really a value and a good potential, an economic and environmental value to exploit this storage capacity by giving a second life to batteries at the end of the vehicle life. So we have already a series of concrete examples, concrete actually applications and collaborations, partnerships in terms of second life applications. Some of them are on the stationary storage field, from large systems to provide energy grids services, to smaller systems for smart building energy management, or fast charging storage stations with power, with electric, with solar power panels, to mobile storage systems based on battery modules. We're working on it with a German startup called Batteries to replace diesel power generators. And there are also a series of promising applications in the transport sector, particularly in the maritime sector, with, for instance, the example of the French startup Neoline, which is building beautiful sailing container ship that we can see here in the bottom left corner. That will have also, in addition, actually it will be powered by the wind, but it will have an additional hybrid powertrain to meet specific conditions such as harbor maneuvers or specific weather conditions. And then it will need dozens of batteries, and of course it will be a much better economic and environmental compromise to use second life batteries. So we are working currently to have maritime certification of our second life EV batteries to be able to install them in this kind of ships. And also the river transportation sector also offers some promising perspectives. And we have inaugurated a couple of months ago with Paris Yacht Marina, a small, how to call it, a cruise, small cruise boat to go cruising with your friends, your family along the Seine River in Paris, which is powered by also two of our second life EV batteries. And there are other applications such as specific specific vehicles like conveyors in airports or safari vehicles, or even onboard energy applications for the utility sector of small, for instance, food trucks. Now, concretely, what does it imply to expand or actually maximize the lifespan of batteries and give them a second life? I'll try to illustrate what it means concretely. So it starts with the collection of a battery, which can be either a defective or low state of health battery, which is collected from a client that came to our network, or the collection of a battery from an end-of-life vehicle, so the electric vehicle that came with the end of its life, or that has an accident and then it cannot be repaired, but the battery is still functional or can be repaired. So these batteries are collected, they are dispatched to one of our 10 battery repair workshops across Europe. And then approximately 99% of these batteries are actually, well, they will be diagnosed, and 99% of them are either functional or can be repaired. And then they will be distributed depending on their state of health or remaining storage capacity. So those with the highest state of health, in the range of 75%, maybe above 70%, will be either returned to the client if he actually owns the battery, or stored into our after-sales network, after-sales replacement stock for the clients who are using their battery in a leasing offer. And then the batteries with intermediate state of health will not be reused in a car because they cannot provide enough driving range. So they will be dispatched to second life applications like the ones, the examples I showed before. And finally, the batteries that are not repairable or that have too low state of health will be sent to recycling, as well as the modules extracted, the defective modules or low state of health modules extracted from the repaired batteries. But then, since a growing number of EU member states are classifying waste lithium batteries as hazardous waste, which implies heavy and, well, burdensome and administrative procedure of transboundary notification if we have to transport waste batteries from one member state to another, then we have to ask many questions at every step of this process, such as what is the status of the battery? Is it a waste battery? Is it a product? Shall we make a transboundary notification, which could take up to 6 months to get the approval to transport the battery to another country for repurposing or recycling? And also, when we are sending to the second life batteries to our second life clients or repurposing workshops, we have to, it is unclear whether we are still responsible for their recycling at the end of the second life or not. So the new battery regulation proposal is bringing some interesting steps, interesting proposals to try to solve these issues, such as simplified out-of-waste procedure, or also, how to say, also what we can call a transfer of extended producer responsibility through this out-of-waste procedure in case of repurposing. However, this may not be enough to allow a smooth functioning of this circular economy within Europe, and to incentivize the OEM to give a second life to batteries, or to transport them to the best recyclers within Europe, which are currently located mainly in France, Germany, or Belgium, mainly, maybe in Northern Europe as well, but not in every member state. So it means that batteries have to be transported from one member state to another anyway to allow this circular economy. And of course, if the same rules are applied within the boundaries of the European Union and at the boundaries of European Union, it will be difficult to, at the same time, allow this smooth functioning of the circular economy while preventing the illegal exports of waste batteries, which is obviously a very legitimate concern of the Commission. So maybe the best way to achieve this is, will be to set up a real single market within the European Union, not only for new batteries, but for used second life and waste batteries as well, which will not depend only on the battery regulation, but also on the waste shipment directive, and can be achieved, for instance, by setting up fast-track procedures to transport batteries without transboundary notification to authorize recycling or repurposing facilities within Europe. It will also be key that the OEMs can, well, that the traceability of repurposed batteries can be ensured to allow the OEMs to monitor how they fulfill their obligations in terms of extended producer responsibility. Because if we have to demonstrate that all the waste batteries are actually collected and recycled, we have to be able to identify and quantify the batteries that have been collected and repurposed for second life, even though they have been repurposed by independent operators out of our control. Of course, there are many other stakes involving circular economy stakes involving the recycling of batteries, but I think the other speakers will be more relevant speakers than me to speak about that.
Thank you. So indeed, it brings us to the next speakers of this second panel. Welcome to Francesco Gattiglio from Eurobat, Claude Chanston from Recharge, Rita Tedesco from ECOS, and Maria Spiraki as representing the Committee of the European Parliament. Welcome all. I would like to kick off, after this nice introduction of Jean-Denis, a question: how do we see in general the role of batteries in circular economy? Is the revision of the Battery Directive really answering on this? Francisco, maybe you can.
Yes, I can start. Thank you, Philippe, and good morning, everyone. So indeed, batteries can play a big role in the circular economy. We already have a tradition in Europe about recycling batteries safely and effectively, and respecting the environment, because we do have already a value chain of recycling for lead and for nickel batteries, which are the ones that we are more used to. Lithium-ion batteries are new, are more complex. They are a bit more difficult to recycle because it is a more complex product, but they are recyclable. And as it was already said during the first panel, we need to recycle them because we cannot have a boomerang effect. We need to be sure about the sustainability of batteries along the entire value chain and their life cycle. And we need to use those materials to produce new batteries. So we need to recover materials as much as possible, of course, taking into account what is actually feasible also from an economic point of view. But we need to maximize the processes, and we need to improve the processes. And to do that, we need the volumes, because if we have only few batteries entering the recycling stream, it is very difficult for recyclers to have a business case. So we are quite confident that in the coming year, processes will improve and the economic case for recycling will improve.
Thank you. Claude, do you share the same opinion? What's your point of view? Claude, you have to unmute your microphone.
Yes, can you hear me now? Very good.
Yeah, indeed.
Very good. Thank you for this opportunity to express some opinion there. Indeed, I share the view expressed by Francesco that batteries do contribute to a circular economy already on the existing flows of recycled batteries. And we expect, of course, more when it comes to these big quantities of lithium batteries coming up. I would like to insist on two specific aspects that were maybe not enough developed. First one is the question of second life, which was discussed by Jean-Denis, is clearly important to understand the whole life cycle of the batteries. And that, of course, will happen before the recycling of batteries. And it's certainly not an opposite position. It's just complementary approach. it is probably better that we have Second Life, as long as the Second Life is really a professional service provided to the industry and to the consumers. And that's not something which is already achieved or may not be achieved as well as we expect. We think particularly about the question of safety of lithium batteries, which are, let's say, energy systems. And as demonstrated by Jean-Denis in a nice slide, there is a possibility, of course, to have plenty type of reuses, which we very much support as long as they are handled by professional in a safe way, in order not to harm the industry image of using, let's say, wrong or bad Second Life batteries. That would be, in fact, one of the boomerang effects that would be very bad on Second Life. So this has to be handled carefully. The second point is mainly about the question of the recovery rate and what we can get from the batteries. Indeed, it is important to make sure that the materials from battery will be recovered. But we have to take into account the situation today. We have to recognize that for the moment, as long as we have the growth of the market that is expected, we are just building a stock. And we cannot get this material back, and we have no, of course, interest in getting these materials back until they went through the full life and even the Second Life when possible. So it's, for the moment, very premature to expect any very significant benefit from recycling until the next 10 to 15 years. And that's really important to assess what can be done right now to support the battery industry growth. And for the moment, and for the next 5 to 10 years, the collection for industrial batteries and the recycling targets for industrial batteries will not make any significant difference because the battery will not come back. So this is important to understand when it comes to the priority and the urgency of what we are proposing as the measures. So in the batteries regulation, new regulation proposed, we see a lot of good things, as was underlined, anticipating that we are not preparing a boomerang effect in storing all of these batteries and building this urban stock. That's certainly a good thing, but we should take care maybe not to over anticipate what will be the processes and the available means to recover the materials in 10 or 15 years from now, and certainly regulate about principle and targets, but not too much on very specific details that are probably not available today. So that's 2 points I wanted to underline.
Thank you very much. And this brings me automatically to Rita Tedesco from ECOS. Rita, welcome on board. I'm of course very curious to listen as an environmental organization. How do you see this upcoming standardization? Did it really answer, or do you still have concerns?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for the event, and also I would like to recall what has already been said by Francesco and Claude. Indeed, just coming back to the role of batteries in circular economy, we, from an environmental perspective, we see the proposal of the Commission as key to allow a longer lifetime of batteries, so which is also key in a circular economy. So not only to have a loop, but also to have a really long loop. In that sense, there are many aspects to underline along this circular value chain of the battery. But as already said, we are really happy to see that the Commission has proposed a better and clear framework for Second Life batteries and also for recycling. There are many points that I would like to follow up of what have been said also in the previous panel. But replying to your question, Philippe, how do we see standardization? This is one of the focuses of my organization. We see that so far the Commission has proposed a lot of principles, a lot of targets, many provisions, but we also know that after this will be discussed, at the Parliament and at the Council, the decision, many decisions will still need to be taken to allow what's in the proposal. In particular, I'm referring to all the series of secondary legislation implementing and implementing acts, for example, and delegated acts that will follow. The Commission has said that this will be developed by the JRC, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, but also by standardization bodies like SEN and SENELEC. And there we expect many, maybe specific details and decisions to be taken, but they will be key to allow second life. For example, Jean Denis has referred to state of health as a key matrix to know and on which we will know whether a battery will go to second life or not, and these will need to be defined in the best way. So yeah, we are really looking forward to many decisions to be taken and many discussions to come. Thank you.
Last comments I would like to hear from Maria Spiraki. You're speaking on behalf of the European Parliament with your Commission point of view.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Well, I would like to say a few things, and I would like to insist on three parameters. It is implementation, implementation, and implementation. To start with the implementation in terms of regions and member states, according to the study of the Commission, which is based on the performance of the implementation of the previous directive. In this regard, I think that it is familiar to all of you, but I would like just to repeat it, that only half of member states had achieved the 2016 collection target of 45% concerning the portable waste batteries. And more than half of all waste portable batteries were not collected, and around 35,000 tons enter municipal waste streams annually. So it is important to close the loop, and I think that we have to insist on mandatory extended producer responsibility schemes. There is a gap in this regard in many member states, including my country, Greece, reinforcing the monitor procedure concerning member states and region, as I have already said, and making the procedure of collecting batteries waste more attractive and more profitable by increasing quantities of different types of batteries, and also support innovation in recycling technology. The second parameter is in terms of material recovery as such. And I think that it is important to discuss on it in the framework of strategic autonomy in the EU, and also in terms of global playing field. In this regard, I think that the introduction of circular batteries by design, the safe management and handling during the treatment of hazardous substances in cell manufacturing, and the introduction of carbon footprint label declaring the environmental impact of all battery value chains placed in the EU market are three measures that are very important. We have also asked for them in our INI report that it comes from the European Parliament. Mrs. Gamon was in charge, and I was the rapporteur on behalf of EPP. It is also important to facilitate further integration of secondary raw materials in the EU, reducing our dependence on third countries. And I fully agree with Claude. It's not time to have a very, very detailed legislation, but it is important to have specific targets, especially when it comes to recovery of critical raw materials. The third, last but not least parameter, according to my opinion, is the engagement of the citizen. By raising awareness, according to the latest report that it comes from the Commission, by raising awareness, we raise also the rate of recycling and batteries, and it is important to engage people in this regard. Thank you very much once again for having me.
Thank you. I see a lot of questions popping up in the Q&A, and there is one that really triggered me. We indeed are, we are not yet in the mature market. We're reaching now, we hope with the end of 2020 that all numbers are in, that we passed 1.5 million EVs on the market. The Commission wants to go by 2030 by 30 million, and we really have to kick off this. So it's indeed, yeah, the question is indeed the appreciation of the regulatory efforts. Are they future-proof? And how is Second Life usability certain or not? The question that person posted is, as we reduce the contents of critical raw materials in new batteries, it may be better to actually recycle the materials into several new batteries rather than using it in a second application in an old battery. That's the reducing cost of new batteries, better performance, higher economy density. I know that there is two opinions on this. I would like to hear your comments on this.
May I start perhaps on this?
You have.
Yes. Well, I have to say that I actually agree with the question on Second Life. So there are indeed uncertainties regarding not the feasibility, but economic value and the benefits of Second Life, because indeed we are talking about batteries that will be reused after perhaps 10 years, 15 years, which means that the battery will be, well, a bit outdated compared to other primary batteries, because let's not forget that the battery industry serves different markets. We serve the automotive market, but we also produce storage batteries, which are designed exactly for that purpose. So a refurbished battery from an EV will always have to compete on the market with a battery which is designed for that purpose and newer, so reasonably thinking with better performances. So Second Life at the end of the day might make sense. There might be a business case there, but we need to see case by case. This is not something that we can say we need to go for Second Life or we need to go for recycling. This is a decision that must be left to the market. And then, of course, there is a point on materials availability. If we look at the batteries that were manufactured a few years ago, they had quite higher cobalt content, for instance, compared to the batteries that we are manufacturing today and compared to the batteries that will be manufactured in the coming years. So we also need to ask ourselves, does it make sense to keep in operation a battery which has such high cobalt content, or it will make more sense to actually take it back, recycle it, and use the cobalt for other applications? And now I want to be clear on this. These are doubts that we have. These are things that must be clarified, but it doesn't mean that we should go in one direction or in another. It just means that we need to be cautious with this. We do not need to push in one direction if we do not have clear indication of what the market will look like. And at this stage, we do not know what the market will look like in the coming years. And just to conclude, let's not forget that Second Life is in direct opposition of recycled content, because if we have a waste battery, we can either reuse the battery or reuse the materials, but we cannot do both at the same time. So if you want to have Second Life, then it means that the targets for recycled content will be met, well, at a later stage at the very least. So we really need to look at the proposal in its entirety and look also at the interaction of each article with the other ones. We cannot look at one article in isolation.
Yep.
Thank you.
May I? Yes.
Yep.
I would like to complement the answer from Francesco, because I share, of course, many of the things which were said, and we as an industry association also support, let's say, decision by the market. But we also recognize there is a need to create boundaries and targets, and to make a smart usage of our waste, which is not only an economical smart usage, but also environmentally funded. And I believe we can create rules for this based on a scientific approach of what means environmentally sounded. And we have tools. The carbon footprint is one of the examples, enabled to compare what would be the environmental impact of recycling compared to Second Life, and what would be the global impact or benefit from the environmental point of view. And this we are very happy to discuss and try to clarify when possible what are the targets that the legislative support could help clarifying when it's come to the sustainability targets of the Second Life. And that can be, let's say, high-level targets, which do not come in the details or whether we need to recycle because there is a high level of cobalt or not, but more about high-level targets like what is the global carbon footprint target, what is the impact of resources availability, which are scientifically discussed topics when it comes to environmental assessments. So that's, I think, one way to try leaving the market the freedom to decide whether which percentage of battery can be used, but also guiding in making sure that we have sustainability still in the targets.
Thank you, Claude.
Hi, Philippe. If I can jump in here just to react from environmental organizations. So as because we are really we are quite supportive of the Second Life concept of for batteries, because we believe, as I was saying before, that it really it can really make the loop longer, and it can extend overall the life cycle of the battery, thus offsetting maybe the environmental impacts that occur in particular during the manufacturing process. So we also know that recycling is also itself a quite energy intensive process. So that would overall, in our opinion, offset certain environmental issues there. And also what we also want to point out is that recycling will happen anyways after the use of the Second Life. So it's not that we will not recycle those materials or that they will be locked in forever. Then of course I understand all the other issues related to performance and the competitiveness with other batteries that are made for that purpose. But I think that here again, as I was saying before, it's very important to define tests and metrics that will be used to assess a battery before it becomes a Second Life battery. Also I want to say here, and also recalling all other comments that have been done before, is that what the Commission has said about recycled content will only apply as from 2030. So it will be in 10 years, and starting with very low percentage. And I think this cannot be used as an argument against Second Life, because probably Second Life would have already happened until then. So yeah, we're still happy that the framework has been clarified, and that if it makes sense to go for manufacturers to also propose Second Life options, then this is possible.
Thank you. And Maria, can you?
Yes, if I may jump in, I would like just to say that, of course, we have to work on the entire proposal and not by article per article, because it is a kind of working in silos. But I fully support the secondary life of batteries, because I think that it is important to reuse some of them. And of course, this kind of approach is not excluding the recyclability of batteries. It is important to understand that we need the secondary raw material market to work. And in this regard, it is important to increase the quantities of batteries that we have for recycle. At the same time, it is important to reuse most of them, some of them, in different types of uses. For example, we can use batteries that they are now using in cars in our apartments, and it is important also to understand that by reusing the batteries, we reduce the energy consumption on which we are working in the Parliament and the Commission as well. And I fully support the approach of the environmental organization that we have to work together and we have to have an holistic approach in this regard.
Thank you very much. I see still quite a lot of questions popping up, but we're really running out of time. So in respect this time, I would really like to thank all the speakers from this panel. Happy that you contributed, and look forward to further discussions in the future. My takeaways is indeed that we should look for a single market for the European Union. Professionalism on second life, keeping time the full lifetime cycle from the batteries, and implementation. I heard the word 3 times popping up, so implementation is very key. And this brings me to the closing speech from Claudio Camon. Welcome. I look forward to hear what you, as member of the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy at the European Parliament, have to say on all the topics that has been raised today. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Claudia Gamon. I'm an MEP from the Liberal Renew Europe group in the Parliament, and I'm on the Committee for Industry, Research and Energy Policies. And I want to thank all the speakers today for their input. It's been really interesting to listen to your remarks. I think that events like these are very important in this crucial time to accompany a constructive debate that we're having on the future of batteries in Europe. I had the pleasure already to work with Ville Niiniistö and Maria Spiraki on the European Parliament's initiative report on energy storage. And we managed to put together quite some very clear and strong calls on the issue, of course, also on batteries, because it's a very important part of the question of energy storage. And what we heard today underlines also my personal belief that batteries are and will be the catalyst of change in the energy and transport systems. Even if most people in their daily life might only encounter batteries in their electric vehicles, in their appliances, in their e-bikes, they might not see the very important role that they play in securing the energy supply in a renewables-based energy system. So batteries are an important, a crucial component of the renewables-based energy systems as a whole. And I think that we should underline the importance that batteries play in this question as well. What we talk about a lot in the European Parliament is some general things also, that if we truly want to become the first carbon neutral continent, the changes need to be fundamental in the systems. And one of the most important fundamental system changes, I believe, will be transparency in carbon emissions. And in our Parliament's report on energy storage, one of the most important points that we made was the need to have clear transparency in regards to the carbon footprint of all storage technologies available. Obviously, when it comes to transparency and emissions, I'm not only talking about storage. We need to have that everywhere, but that's what we focused on at the time. And we all know that also for the carbon footprint of batteries, it is highly dependent on where they are produced and how they are produced. So for the European battery industry to have a sustainable and also, and that's very important, competitive future, a mandatory declaration of the carbon footprint will be an essential prerequisite. Why? First of all, because it will show the advantages of batteries and lay waste to the a big amount of disinformation on batteries that is still out there, unfortunately. And second of all, it will show the advantages of European-made batteries in the fight against climate change. We must not disadvantage our own industry by importing cheaper batteries from third countries, but rather set the standards that help us indeed achieving the climate goals while creating fair competition, while being staying true to our market-based system and making use of the advantages that this poses in this crucial time. I think that a declaration of GHG emissions will also be crucial for a carbon border adjustment mechanism, however that may look like. The Commission proposal includes provisions on such a declaration from 2024 on, followed by performance classes in 2026 and a GHG maximum threshold in 2026. I think that this principle in general is the right way to go. However, obviously now starting in this process, we will have to look at the details. We see already what should be included in the calculation. So mining and extracting of raw materials, for example, which is good. But for the methodology, we will have to wait what the Commission proposal in secondary legislation will say. I think that it's really positive that the Commission built the calculation methods on already existing standards. Although, given that it took 4 years already to develop the methods for lithium batteries alone, I think it might be quite an ambitious timeline. However, if we can work on something to speed this entire process up, obviously that would be a very good sign indeed. Because what I always find very impressive about the developments in the last 10 years in the battery sector is how fast the development in the technology is going. And legislation will have to keep up with that pace. So if we see that something took a long time in the past, we should acknowledge that and try to speed up the processes. And that brings me to another point, and that is to set a solid framework for sustainable electric vehicle batteries. And for all industries, we need a solid and stable legal framework to make long-term investments possible here in the sector in Europe. That means that we will need to put in place the new regulations soon and keep an eye on the specifications that will come after the delegated acts to ensure that there are no delays for our very important industry here in Europe. We will need to align our European legislation, such as the battery regulation, the regulation for passenger cars and trucks, the taxonomy, and so on, to avoid different or conflicting measures that could come up. I want to, in the end, highlight what has already been said by many speakers and underline, and that is the second life and reuse standards that will already contribute very soon to a successful battery industry in the European Union. I'm looking forward to working on this issue in the two committees in ITRE and in ENVI in the European Parliament. This has been a super interesting event for me to follow as well. I want to thank all the speakers, and it's a great time to work in batteries and to work on battery legislation. Batteries are one of the most important catalysts for change and for fighting climate change. And I think we should all underline the importance of what we are doing here and what the players in the industry are doing here, and that there's still a lot of potential in Europe to work on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your closing words on here. We still have a way to go, and that's for sure. And there is still many questions left. So I'm looking forward to meet you in the future, share some thoughts, share some perspectives, and continue the discussion. Thank you very much for attending this webinar, and look forward to meet you, hopefully for life in the near future. Have a nice day. Bye.